eating rats. While stationed at this place, Chattanooga, rations were very scarce and hard to get, and it was, perhaps, economy on the part of our generals and commissaries to issue rather scant rations. About this time, we learned that Pemberton's army, stationed at Vicksburg, were subsisting entirely on rats. Instead of the idea being horrid, we were glad to know that necessity is the mother of invention, and that the idea had originated in the mind of genius. We at once acted upon the information and started out rat hunting, but we couldn't find any rats. Presently, we came to an old outhouse that seemed to be a natural harbor for this kind of vermin. The house was quickly torn down, and out jumped an old residenter who was old and gray. I suppose that he had been chased before, but we had jumped him and were determined to catch him or burst a boiler. After chasing him backwards and forwards, the rat finally got tired of this foolishness and started for his hole. But a rat's tail is the last that goes in the hole, and as he went in, we made a grab for his tail. Well, tail hold broke, and we held the skin of his tail in our hands, but we were determined to have that rat. After hard work, we caught him. We skinned him, washed and salted him, buttered and peppered him, and fried him. He actually looked nice. The delicate aroma of the frying rat came to our hungry nostrils. We were keen to eat a piece of rat. Our teeth were on edge. Yeah, even our mouths watered to eat a piece of rat. Well, after a while, he was said to be done. I got a piece of cold corn dodger, laid my piece of the rat on it, ate a little piece of bread, and raised the piece of rat to my mouth when I happened to think of how that rat's tail did slip. I had lost my appetite for dead rat. I did not eat any rat. It was my first and last effort to eat dead rats. Swimming the Tennessee with roasting ears. The Tennessee River is about a quarter of a mile wide at Chattanooga. Right across the river was an immense cornfield. The green corn was waving with every little breeze that passed. The tassels were bowing and nodding their heads. The pollen was flying across the river like little snowdrops, and everything seemed to say, "Come hither, Johnny Reb. Come hither, Johnny. Come hither." The river was wide, but we were hungry. The roasting ears looked tempting. We pulled off our clothes and launched into the turbid stream, and were soon on the other bank. Here was the field, and here were the roasting ears. But where was the raft or canoe? We thought of old Abraham and Isaac and the sacrifice. "My son, gather the roasting ears. There will be a way provided." We gathered the roasting ears. We went back and gathered more roasting ears, time and again. The bank was lined with green roasting ears. Well, what was to be done? We began to shuck the corn. We would pull up a few shucks on one ear and tie it to the shucks of another, first one and then another, until we had at least 100 tied together. We put the train of corn into the river, and as it began to float off, we jumped in, and taking the foremost ear in our mouth, struck out for the other bank. Well, we made the landing all correct. I merely mention the above incident to show to what extremity soldiers would resort. Thousands of such occurrences were performed by the private soldiers of the rebel army, and detailed to go foraging. One day, I was detailed to go with a wagon train way down in Georgia on a foraging expedition. It was the first time since I had enlisted as a private that I had struck a good thing. No roll call, no drilling, no fatigue duties, building fortifications, standing picket, dress parade, reviews, or retreats had to be answered to. The same old monotonous roll call that had been answered 5,000 times in these 3 years. I felt like a free man. The shackles of discipline had for a time been unfettered. This was bliss. This was freedom. This was liberty. The sky looked brighter. The birds sang more beautifully and sweeter than I remember to have ever heard them. Even the little streamlets and branches danced and jumped along the pebbly beds, while the minnows sported and frolicked under the shining ripples. The very flocks and herds in the pasture looked happy and gay. Even the screech of the wagons that needed greasing seemed to send forth a happy sound. It was fine, I tell you. The blackberries were ripe, and the roadsides were lined with this delicious fruit. The Lord said that he would curse the ground for the disobedience of man, and henceforth it should bring forth thorns and briars. But the very briars that had been cursed were loaded with the abundance of God's goodness. I felt then, like David in one of his psalms, "The Lord is good, the Lord is good, for his mercy endureth forever." Please pass the butter. For several days the wagon train continued on until we had arrived at the part of the country to which we had been directed. Whether they bought or pressed the corn, I know not, but the old gentleman invited us all to take supper with him. If I have ever eaten a better supper than that, I have forgotten it. They had biscuit for supper. What? Flour bread? Did my eyes deceive me? Well, there were biscuit, sure enough flour bread, and sugar and coffee, genuine Rio, none of your rye or potato coffee, and butter, regular butter, and ham and eggs, and turnip greens, and potatoes, and fried chicken, and nice clean plates. None of your tin affairs, and a snow-white tablecloth, and napkins, and white-handled knives, and silver forks. At the head of the table was the madam, having on a pair of golden spectacles, and at the foot the old gentleman. He said grace, and, to cap the climax, 2 handsome daughters. I know that I had never seen 2 more beautiful ladies. They had on little white aprons trimmed with jaconet edging, and collars as clean and white as snow. They looked good enough to eat, and I think at that time I would have given 10 years of my life to have kissed one of them. We were invited to help ourselves. Our plates were soon filled with the tempting food, and our tumblers with California beer. We would have liked it better had it been twice as strong, but what it lacked in strength we made up in quantity. The old lady said, "Daughter, hand the gentleman the butter." It was the first thing that I had refused, and the reason that I did so was because my plate was full already. Now there is nothing that will offend a lady so quickly as to refuse to take butter when handed to you. If you should say, "No, madam, I never eat butter," it is a direct insult to the lady of the house. Better, far better, for you to have remained at home that day. If you don't eat butter, it is an insult. If you eat too much, she will make your ears burn after you have left. It is a regulator of society. It is a civilizer. It is a luxury and a delicacy that must be touched and handled with care and courtesy on all occasions. Should you desire to get on the good side of a lady, just give a broad, sweeping, slathering compliment to her butter. It beats kissing the dirty-faced baby. It beats anything. Too much praise cannot be bestowed upon the butter, be it good, bad, or indifferent to your notions of things. But to her butter is always good, superior, excellent. I did not know this characteristic of the human female at the time, or I would have taken a delicate slice of the butter. Here is a sample of the colloquy that followed. "Mister, have some butter?" "Not any at present, thank you, madam." "Well, I insist upon it. Our butter is nice." "Oh, I know it's nice, but my plate is full, thank you." "Well, take some anyhow." One of the girls spoke up and said, "Mother, The gentleman don't wish butter. Well, I want him to know that our butter is clean, anyhow. Well, madam, if you insist upon it, there is nothing that I love so well as warm biscuit and butter. I'll thank you for the butter. I dive in. I go in a little too heavy. The old lady hints in a delicate way that they sold butter. I dive in heavier. That cake of butter was melting like snow in a red-hot furnace. The old lady says, "We sell butter to the soldiers at a mighty good price." I dive in afresh. She says, "I get $1 a pound for that butter," and I remark with a good deal of nonchalance, "Well, madam, it is worth it," and dive in again. I didn't marry one of the girls. We evacuate Chattanooga. One morning, while sitting around our campfires, we heard a boom, and a bombshell passed over our heads. The Yankee army was right on the other bank of the Tennessee River. Bragg didn't know of their approach until the cannon fired. Rosecrans' army is crossing the Tennessee River. A part are already on Lookout Mountain. Some of their cavalry scouts had captured some of our foraging parties in Will's Valley. The air was full of flying rumors. Wagons are being packed, camps are broken up, and there is a general hubbub everywhere. But your old soldier is always ready at a moment's notice. The assembly is sounded, form companies, and we are ready for a march, or a fight, or a detail, or anything. If we are marched 1,000 miles or 20 yards, it is all the same. The private soldier is a machine that has no right to know anything. He is a machine that moves without any volition of his own. If Edison could invent a wooden man that could walk and load and shoot, then you would have a good sample of the private soldier, and it would have this advantage. The private soldier eats, and the wooden man would not. We left Chattanooga, but whither bound we knew not and cared not. But we marched toward Chickamauga and crossed at Lee and Gordon's Mill. The bull of the woods. On our way to Lafayette from Lee and Gordon's Mill, I remember a ludicrous scene almost bordering on sacrilege. Rosecrans's army was very near us, and we expected before 3 days elapsed to be engaged in battle. In fact, we knew there must be a fight or a foot race, one or the other. We could smell, as it were, the battle afar off. One Sabbath morning it was announced that an eloquent and able LLD from Nashville was going to preach, and as the occasion was an exceedingly solemn one, we were anxious to hear this divine preach from God's holy word, and as he was one of the big ones, the whole army was formed in close column and stacked their arms. The cannons were parked, all pointing back toward Chattanooga. The scene looked weird and picturesque. It was in a dark wilderness of woods and vines and overhanging limbs. In fact, it seemed but the home of the owl and the bat and other varmints that turned night into day. Everything looked solemn. The trees looked solemn. The scene looked solemn. The men looked solemn. Even the horses looked solemn. You may be sure, reader, that we felt solemn. The Reverend LLD had prepared a regular war sermon before he left home, and of course had to preach it, appropriate or not appropriate. It was in him, and had to come out. He opened the service with a song. I did remember the piece that was sung, but right now I cannot recall it to memory. But as near as I can now recollect, here is his prayer, verbatim et literatim. O, thou immaculate, invisible, eternal, and holy being, the exudations of whose effulgence illuminates this terrestrial sphere, we approach thy presence, being covered all over with wounds and bruises and putrefying sores, from the crowns of our heads to the soles of our feet. And thou, O Lord, art our dernier resort, The whole world is in great machine, managed by thy puissance. The beatific splendors of thy face irradiate the celestial region and felicitate the saints. There are the most exuberant profusions of thy grace and the sempiternal efflux of thy glory. God is an abyss of light, a circle whose center is everywhere, and his circumference nowhere. Hell is the dark world made up of spiritual sulfur and other ignited ingredients, disunited and unharmonized, and without that pure balsamic oil that flows from the heart of God. When the old fellow got this far, I lost the further run of his prayer, but regret very much that I did so, because it was so grand and fine that I would have liked very much to have kept such an appropriate prayer for posterity. In fact, it lays it on heavy over any prayer I ever heard, and I think the new translators ought to get it and have it put in their book as a sample prayer, but they will have to get the balance of it from the eminent LLD. In fact, he was so high-larnt that I don't think anyone understood him but the generals. The colonels might every now and then have understood a word, and maybe a few of the captains and lieutenants, because Lieutenant Lansdowne told me he understood every word the preacher said, and further informed me that it was none of your one-horse, old-fashioned country prayers that privates knew anything about, but was bang-up, first-rate, orthodox. Well, after singing and praying, he took his text. I quote entirely from memory, "Blessed be the Lord God, who teaches my hands to war and my fingers to fight." Now, reader, that was the very subject we boys did not want to hear preached on that occasion at least. We felt like some other subject would have suited us better. I forget how he commenced his sermon, but I remember that after he got warmed up a little, he began to pitch in on the Yankee nation and gave them particular fits as to their genealogy. He said that we of the South had descended from the royal and aristocratic blood of the Huguenots of France and of the Cavaliers of England, etc., but that the Yankees were the descendants of the crop-eared Puritans and witch-burners who came over in the Mayflower and settled at Plymouth Rock. He was warm on this subject and waked up the echoes of the forest. He said that he and his brethren would fight the Yankees in this world, and, if God permit, chase their frightened ghosts in the next through fire and brimstone. About this time we heard the awfullest racket produced by some wild animal tearing through the woods toward us, and the cry, "Look out! Look out! Hooey! 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 Look out!" And there came running right through our midst a wild bull, mad with terror and fright, running right over and knocking down the divine and scattering Bibles and hymn books in every direction. The services were brought to a close without the doxology. This same brave chaplain rode along with our brigade on an old string-haltered horse as we advanced to the attack at Chickamauga, exhorting the boys to be brave, to aim low, and to kill the Yankees as if they were wild beasts. He was eloquent and patriotic. He stated that if he only had a gun, he too would go along as a private soldier. You could hear his voice echo and re-echo over the hills. He had worked up his patriotism to a pitch of genuine bravery and daring that I had never seen exhibited when fliff, fluff, 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 a whir, a boom, and a shell screams through the air. The Reverend LLD stops to listen like an old sow when she hears the wind and says, "Remember, boys, that he who is killed will sup tonight in paradise." Some soldier hallooed at the top of his voice, "Well, parson, you come along and take supper with us." Boom. Whir. A bomb burst, and the parson at that moment put spurs to his horse and was seen to limber to the rear, and almost every soldier yelled out, "The parson isn't hungry, and never eat supper. I remember this incident, and so does every member of the First Tennessee Regiment. Presentment, or the wing of the angel of death. Presentment is always a mystery. The soldier may at one moment be in good spirits, laughing and talking. The wing of the death angel touches him. He knows that his time has come. It is but a question of time with him then. He knows that his days are numbered. I cannot explain it. God has numbered the hairs of our heads, and not a sparrow falls without his knowledge. How much more valuable are we than many sparrows? We had stopped at Lee and Gordon's mill and gone into camp for the night. 3 days' rations were being issued. When Bob Stout was given his rations, he refused to take them. His face wore a serious, woe-begone expression. He was asked if he was sick, and said no, but added, "Boys, my days are numbered, my time has come. In 3 days from today, I will be lying, right yonder on that hillside, a corpse. Ah, you may laugh. My time has come. I've got a $20 gold piece in my pocket that I've carried through the war, and a silver watch that my father sent me through the lines. Please take them off when I'm dead, and give them to Captain Irvine, to give to my father when he gets back home. Here are my clothing and blanket, that anyone who wishes them may have. My rations I do not wish at all. My gun and cartridge box I expect to die with." The next morning the assembly sounded about 2 o'clock. We commenced our march in the darkness, and marched 25 miles to a little town by the name of Lafayette, to the relief of General Pillow, whose command had been attacked at that place. After accomplishing this, we marched back by another road to Chickamauga. We camped on the banks of Chickamauga on Friday night, and Saturday morning we commenced to cross over. About 12 o'clock we had crossed. No sooner had we crossed than an order came to double quick. General Forrest's cavalry had opened the battle. Even then the spent balls were falling amongst us with that peculiar thud so familiar to your old soldier. Double quick. There seemed to be no rest for us. Forrest is needing reinforcements. Double quick, close up in the rear. Sizz, sizz, double quick. Boom. Hurry up. Bang, bang. A rattled, da bang, bang. Says. Boom, boom, boom. Hurry up. Double quick. Boom, bang. Halt. Front, right dress. Boom, boom. And 3 soldiers are killed and 20 wounded. Billy Webster's arm was torn out by the roots, and he killed, and a fragment of shell buried itself in Jim McEwen's side, also killing Mr. Fane King, a conscript from Mount Pleasant. Forward. Guide center. March. Charge bayonets. Fire at will. Commence firing. This is where the LLD ran. We debouched through the woods, firing as we marched the Yankee line about 200 yards off. Bang, bang, size, size. It was a sort of running fire. We kept up a constant fire as we advanced. In 10 minutes we were face to face with the foe. It was but a question as to who could load and shoot the fastest. The army was not up. Bragg was not ready for a general battle. The big battle was fought the next day, Sunday. We held our position for 2 hours and 10 minutes in the midst of a deadly and galling fire, being enfiladed and almost surrounded, when General Forrest galloped up and said, "Colonel Field, look out. You're almost surrounded. You had better fall back." The order was given to retreat. I ran through a solid line of blue coats. As I fell back, they were upon the right of us, they were upon the left of us, they were in front of us, they were in the rear of us. It was a perfect hornet's nest. The balls whistled around our ears like the escape valves of 10,000 engines. The woods seemed to be blazing. Everywhere, at every jump, would rise a lurking foe. But to get up and dust was all we could do. I was running along by the side of Bob Stout. General Preston Smith stopped me and asked if our brigade was falling back. I told him it was. He asked me the second time if it was Maney's brigade that was falling back. I told him it was. I heard him call out, "Attention! Forward!" One solid sheet of leaden hail was falling around me. I heard General Preston Smith's brigade open. It seemed to be platoons of artillery. The earth jarred and trembled like an earthquake. Deadly missiles were flying in every direction. It was the very incarnation of death itself. I could almost hear the shriek of the death angel passing over the scene. General Smith was killed in 10 minutes after I saw him. Bob Stout and I stopped. Said I, "Bob, you weren't killed as you expected." He did not reply, for at that very moment a solid shot from the Federal guns struck him between the waist and the hip, tearing off one leg and scattering his bowels all over the ground. I heard him shriek out, "Oh, oh, God!" His spirit had flown before his body struck the ground. Farewell, friend. We will meet over yonder. When the cannonball struck Billy Webster, tearing his arm out of the socket, he did not die immediately, but as we were advancing to the attack, we left him and the others lying where they fell upon the battlefield. But when we fell back to the place where we had left our knapsacks, Billy's arm had been dressed by Dr. Bullwist, and he seemed to be quite easy. He asked Jim Fogey to please write a letter to his parents at home. He wished to dictate the letter. He asked me to please look in his knapsack and get him a clean shirt, and said that he thought he would feel better if he could get rid of the blood that was upon him. I went to hunt for his knapsack and found it, but when I got back to where he was, poor, good Billy Webster was dead. He had given his life to his country. His spirit is with the good and brave. No better or braver man than Billy Webster ever drew the breath of life. His bones lie yonder today, upon the battlefield of Chickamauga. I loved him. He was my friend. Many and many a dark night have Billy and I stood together upon the silent picket post. Ah, reader, my heart grows sick, and I feel sad while I try to write my recollections of that unholy and uncalled for war. But he that ruleth the heavens doeth all things well. That concludes the 12th part of the story. Thank you very much for listening. Please subscribe for more episodes and leave a comment.